I got several unusual, unrecognized laws that maybe I'll touch on, plus several fairly practical matters. That is, to the uninitiated, if they just heard this, they would think that perhaps one or two of these are the sorts of things a person might be able to use. The rest of it might be the kind of thing that might use you. But one is, surely all of you have heard about this. It normally comes from the areas over in the apparent state, either internally or outernally. But apparently out there, it comes from the institutions of education or psychology. And the song goes like this, that a spokesman for one of those institutions, let us say a psychologist, questions the validity of tests, let us say IQ tests, for instance, and they point out, and even personality tests, as they call them, psychological profiles. They say that a faulty test giving, therefore, an unreliable result affecting the person who took the test can turn into a self-fulfilling prophecy. That is, this happens, you read about it, that someone takes a test at an early age and the test stores look at it and say, well, this child is retarded. And they stick this child in a home for retarded nippers. And then 19, 20 years later, some scrub-faced attorney with nothing else to do decides to do a little pro bono work. And he starts checking around. Anyway, they dig into it and they find out they've never tried to help this guy. Now he's 19 or 20. And somebody gets to talking to him and they find out, they do some more tests of a different kind, and they find out he has the IQ in the high 3 figures. Or they take some child, you surely know what I'm talking about, they will say that a faulty test score that they tell the kid's parents, let's say we're still talking about children, that your child is marginally retarded, severely retarded, and sure enough, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You stick away this person in a retarded folks' home, and sure enough, they apparently are retarded until somebody finds out otherwise. Or if it's not that bad, somebody that they seems to be marginally, or they call it educationally impaired at an early age, and so they put them in classes for 20-watt bulbs instead of the regular class. And this goes on for years and years until one day somebody, through talking to the child at some other test, decides, well, this kid doesn't belong here, and they do some more tests and they find out, yeah. They ask the kid, why didn't you say anything? And they say, well, that's my environment. I thought everybody was as slow as the rest of them. So the point is, they continue, it's going through a new phase now, attack and question tests, but the point I want you to see, and it doesn't have to be just tests, you understand. They can just happen without tests. They can happen out in the apparent environment of the community. If somebody starts telling a family that your kid at an early age, he throws a rock and breaks out a window. He does it once or twice, and they keep saying, this kid's going to grow up to be a juvenile delinquent. And they keep saying that, and sure enough, he does grow up and become a crook. And nowadays, it is not uncommon for a psychologist, a sociologist, somebody to say, well, this child did not have a fair chance because we know for a fact, there are witnesses that will testify, that he was harangued, labeled at an early age as being a juvenile delinquent, and if you keep hearing that kind of thing, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Or somebody's father keeps telling the kid, you're clumsy, you're clumsy. Boy, I want a kid that could play softball and baseball and football, and you're clumsy, you're clumsy. And sure enough, he grows up, and every other week he falls down and breaks a bone. They say it's self-fulfilling prophecy. All right, do you hear this? In the city, there seems to be real value to that verbal currency. But now, I got a question for you. I almost want to take off on a side path for a second. You remember I have pointed out, without going into detail yet, and even now, that in the 3D world, you've got to be able to test things, and this is not the end of it by any means, but by seeing that the opposite of everything is just as valid, that you've got to be able to turn things around. If not, you're not even operating. I don't even know why you're here. You've got to be able to see that. You've got to be able to see that other people, even in the city, that there's got to be another group of people somewhere holding the opposite view. Or if it doesn't appear to be the actual opposite, it's a kind of second cousin parallel view. But you've got to be able, if 2 and 2 is 4, just what an equation is, you've got to be able to see that 2 and 2 is not really any kind of change in either two of those ideas, things, numbers. The equation itself is simply a restatement. All products, all end results of all mathematical operations is not that one thing has done something to something else. One of the twos, or 2 and 3 is 5. So as to not get you, I don't have to keep qualifying the twos. 2 and 3 is 5. Putting 2 to 3 didn't do something to 3. 2 plus 3 equals 5 is not really much of anything. All it's done is restated the initial situation and renamed it. At least you think that I'm talking about something else. Get ready. Why is it that life has this idea that there is such a thing without any doubt as self-fulfilling prophecies, but they're all negative? Why do you never hear of testing or otherwise of someone saying through a test or just through their own observation that this child is brilliant? This child is artistically of the genius level. And later it turns out through some additional testing or other opinions that he is not. But by then it's too late. He's already at MIT at the age of 12. He's already having one-man shows throughout Europe. He's the toast of New York in artistic circles. His little symphony, people are now looking at Mozart and his 12-year-old symphonies when he was 12 and going, boy, was Mozart, why is he wasting his time? This kid's 9. You never hear of that. And them coming along later and go, wait a minute, that kid's not a genius. We got these new tests, try it again. But by then, as I said, instead of we talking about now somebody unfairly put in a retarded folks home, and they sure enough turned out to be apparently retarded, and they talk to them a while and find out they're not, and they let them out, and sure enough, they almost instantly recover and get up to date, up to their chronological age. Why is there not the opposite? Why is there not that this kid was erroneously, through faulty testing, judged to be a genius at the age of 6? He flowered. He's at MIT. He's a sophomore. All right, he's a junior. And he's 11 now, and they have some new tests, and he takes it, and they find out he wasn't a genius, and suddenly he collapses. In the same way, if they took out this apparently retarded guy, and he gets all right, and he's not actually retarded, and he gets it back up to speed, then this guy that was a genius, through faulty testing, he's found to be a genius, he's operating like a genius, and then he find out he's not, and he goes, oh, and he falls back to the average level of an 11-year-old. What gives? Why is the only idea of self-fulfilling prophecies negative? Think about it a second. And you people just seeing this on tape maybe for the first time, and other times in other places, but you're seeing this really has nothing to do, very little, with psychology. That's not the point of this, or testing, or retardation, or burgeoning genius. It has to do with the operations of life that are not observed through ordinary intelligence. And it tells you something. Plus it's fun. Plus it's interesting. Everybody else has to find expensive hobbies. And if you can do this, all you got to do is get up in the morning and open your eyes. So why is it, and this self-fulfilling prophecy also, as surely you know, is not something that is modern. It is not simply something that has happened after the Stanford, when they made up their testing, or in the 20th century. They have been talking about this as far back as mythology, back in the Western world in Grecian times. The term self-fulfilling prophecy, that somebody makes a statement about something, and sure enough it comes true. But then they, without even testing, 2,000 years ago, then people, writers, would-be philosophers, social observers, then want to point out, with the original observation, when somebody said something about somebody else, it was flawed to begin with. It was an erroneous observation. They made it up. They lied. They had the wrong party they were talking about. They were talking about some other guy named Herodotus Jr. when they made that statement. And yet the guy they said it to, and the people around went, really? And they went, yeah, I saw him do it. It became a self-fulfilling prophecy until they found out that there had been a mistake made. So But you understand the self-fulfilling prophecy is always on the basis that it's negative, that something negative was said, something that would be an energy shortfall, that this guy is stupid, this guy is retarded, this guy is a crook, this guy has no wherewithal at all. And sure enough, it proved to be true until we found out that there was a mistake made. We identified the wrong guy, the wrong test. And yet, once the prophecy was made from a certain quarter, from a certain area of life's body, it began to fulfill itself. What gives that there is nothing at all parallel? You know, you laughed at me saying the guy's adjudged to be a genius, and they find he's not, and sure enough he's not. You laughed. But I didn't make up an extreme, sarcastic example. That's about the only example I can make up. You've never heard of another one. I'm not covering it up. There's not some common example that I'm hiding behind that extreme one. That's it. You have never heard of such a thing. It does not happen. Question. More impressive. Query. Why? Why? Well, there's probably a Kai root somewhere that a man who asks a good question better, by God, have a good answer. That's not the same one as a man with a... I'll save that one, never mind. Don't want to confuse the issue. To answer through a general pointing in a general direction of why life does not do this, let me ask another question. Do you recall, several nights ago, I brought up again the word pretension. And I mentioned the pretension of love, not in some pejorative sense, but the pretension of love is love. The pretension of religion is religion. Now, I've had Kai root, and through other little sources I've been doing to you over the last some months, I've thrown in variations of the same thing. One of them, Kai root, had some guy point out, if he didn't, that in a sense, only those who believe they have a soul have a soul. Only those who believe in death die. Which has got to be elusive, right? It's got to be metaphorical. Maybe, maybe not. Because what I was about to ask is a follow-up question to my question. What if you could pretend? What if you could create and sustain the pretension of being more intelligent? Actually being more complex? What then would stop you from actually being more complex? Who would stop you? Better yet, in what way is life arranged that anybody could find you out? If you could do it, if you could sustain the pretense of being more complex, what could ever happen? What other kind of test, what kind of interview, what other kind of social commentary by some other human who would not be up to this level, how could you ever be found out? Do you see that that has any relationship to me even threatening I was going to answer my question as to what gives that life does not have what would seem to be a positive version of self-fulfilling prophecies? Think about that. All right, I'll think about it for you. What if that were a possibility, and what if it was fairly well known? Or what if I could point it out, and a whole lot of people, you went and told some people, and they told some more people, and it grew, and let's say there was some validity to this, and suddenly large numbers of people began to produce and sustain the pretension that they were more intelligent / complex, and in a sense became so. If life wanted that done, it would already have ready examples of positive self-fulfilling prophecies, would it not? And it does not. You didn't follow that? What if it works and life don't want it to work? It's why life doesn't have examples of it. Put to you another way. Anytime you find what seems to be a perfect example of 2 + 3 equals, and you can't find out what it is, or it says 5, but you doubt it because you can't find anywhere that says 5 = 2 + 3. In other words, you find an example that is taken as common wisdom, or it may strike your old line of intelligence as being self-evident. But you can't turn it backwards. You can't find an example wherein life has arranged that some group of people, or that even makes any sense, that you can even find an example that the opposite of this, don't worry about true, the opposite of this is visible, has been visible, is out in some of the common coinage in the intellectual realm. It's not there. If it's not there, you've got an interesting area at which to peak. Because there's some reason, like in this example, what I'm trying to convey to you, it's not because I am so smart and everybody else is so dumb, which of course is the point, but it's not that I'm the only person that can see the examples of life putting out positive examples of self-fulfilling prophecies, because I told you there are none. So it's not that I see them and everybody else doesn't. They're not there. Except I see that they're not there, and nobody else even realizes they're not there. That if you talk to just the average, middle of the bell curve person on this planet, and you mentioned self-fulfilling prophecy, and you said, you know what is meant by that? They'd say, yeah. And if you said, have you ever noticed that all self-fulfilling prophecies, no matter who uses it, no matter what seemed to be the circumstance, they're always of a negative basis? That is, that there was a self-fulfilling prophecy that was, you understand what I mean by negative? You'd say any doubt, I'd say, well, it detracted from the person's life, and or it would seem to threaten the well-being of his or her community. It would seem to have been something lacking in their character, their intelligence, their physical wherewithal. It would seem to be, whenever it said a self-fulfilling prophecy of something, when you heard it, you'd go, uh-oh. Then they might go, well, all right, yeah, what's the point? If I said, you don't find that curious? They go, good grief, don't waste my time, right? If I said, well, there's not any positive, they go, well, what's the point of that? See, the point is, there's these holes and cracks everywhere, and everybody else is afraid of stepping on them. They won't break their mother's back, or they don't even want to look through it. Anytime you can find, and I've done this for you before, it may not be the last time, that there is something that is just common knowledge, that just almost everyone knows the term self-fulfilling prophecy, but you point out that they're all negative, and then you consider, yeah, there's no doubt, I cannot think of an exception to it. And then I say, you don't find it interesting that life does not produce examples of, forget right or wrong, call that right if you want to, there are no wrong examples, that life apparently has produced something that almost everybody is aware of, and it seemed to have produced it not in the regular three-dimensional sense, that is, that it's at least in duplicate. It puts out a singular version, and it's almost as though it has stuck its finger in everybody's one eye so that they don't realize, well, there's only one possibility here, which everything else, from the flavors of ice cream to the deities, there are two, and yet you're surrounded by things that are taken as being absolutely obvious, and yet they're only obvious in one case. There is a reason. There is always a reason, and the reason always has to do with out of sync, out of tempo expansion. And it's exactly what stuff like this is about. If you well, let us assume that you believe that somewhere in the past, whatever it was, that somewhere in the past, in religious guise or otherwise, that this kind of activity has gone on before, and there's some historical trace of it. Look back at whoever you considered that somebody was great that you read about, a Buddha, a Moses, a Confucius, all that kind of stuff. And if you'll notice, they're real good stuff if you can receive it the right way. Not that it's any great profit to do it, but I'm sure that all of you had some kind of mild intellectual or spiritual heroes in the past. You should be able to see that one of the things they were doing, you just didn't realize it, is they were taking things that existed unbeknownst to their audience at the time in an apparently, well, to them, singular fashion, and showed another side to it. That's what is normally referred to, as much as they debase the term, but as a kind of revelation. reveal knowledge, some kind of new insight that this person apparently, just from city view, produced some quantum burst of energy at their time. Nowadays, the people in the city, ordinary old world intelligence, looks back and they want to call it the gods touched them and blah blah blah. But one of the things they were doing, just verbally, you can see it. You don't have to go back and read. Surely you can just remember a few things in your head from probably your own religion. And some of the things that were considered the hearts of religions or philosophical systems was them taking something that was actually existing singularly, and nobody noticed it, and they brought up in a similar way what I'm doing tonight, that have you ever noticed, is what they were saying to people, did you ever notice that we take one thing for being true, and the audience goes, yes, yes. Did you notice that it's in a negative sense? They went, okay, okay. They said, you don't find that curious? That what seemed to be the gods of our fathers, our forefathers, the beliefs that you're now operating under, the information that you take as being a valid description of reality, that it's only offering this negative possibility? I know that gets sticky. Go back and do that on your own. But anytime you find that, there's a reason. I threatened several strange, unrecognized laws and more practical aspects. Believe it or not, if I don't die, I'm going to tie them all together. So here comes one. Here's one for you. In the 3D world, an unrecognized law. A phenomenon, but there is a law behind it. The phenomenon is this: that as energy costs increase, more work gets done. Now back in the three-dimensional world as perceived by ordinary intelligence, what would we call that? Well, it's not literally impossible, but it's obviously fallacious. I mean, it's not true. That is not the way things operate. You know that. Not in the good old three-dimensional world as we know it, if we're back home. But it's a fact. And the manifestation of it even reveals itself. But again, it's not recognized. You're only seeing parts of it in the city. You're only seeing parts of it with old intelligence. It's the pressures, it's the costs, and it is the rewards of non-snooze growth. It is the pressures, the cost, the rewards of we never sleep evolution. It is, once you understand it, then I could say that you are a real explorer. It is a real explorer then being the Denny's, the huddle houses of life's very own space pad. It happens in the city, but it's not seen. It happens at ordinary levels, but as always you're dealing with, like my spherical saddle, and it comes around and you only see parts of it, what I call the three-dimensional world. That and only that which is available through all the senses. At that level, as cost increase, now things I know, once you carry them far enough, things seem to balance out and costs go up, production goes down, production comes back up, costs level out. We know all that. But I'm saying at the spot that energy, that the cost increased at that moment, and for some moments in the ordinary time, more work does not get done. The immediate impact of cost increase of whatever it is, gasoline, all kinds of fossil fuels, the labor pool, as the costs go up, less work gets done. in any instance, because whatever it is, if we're talking about the cost is going up or producing electricity, then all these manufacturing plants, all these that must use, that the heart of their energy supply is electricity, then immediately, a day, a month, a week, who knows how long it's going to take, it doesn't matter in an individual case. But immediately, as the prices go up, the work done goes down. That is, you can consider that just an immediate three-dimensional law of economics. It's even a law of physics. But it's not true. That is not the full extent of it. Because the real case is, as the energy costs go up, the amount of work increases. More work gets done, the more it costs. How could it be otherwise? How could life sustain itself? How could there be this non-ending growth? At least you cannot see life with more than the eyes you have now. How have you managed? How has any human managed to go from being this single-cell, three-dimensional, fertilized egg up to the point you are now? Because the energy costs continue to increase. But you would be dead if not more work was getting done. Of course, up to a certain point, and then no work gets done. But then you're not paying any energy costs anymore when that happens. It is, to use fairly ordinary terms, which I've already done, but it has to do, and I mean more than the dictionary means, an ordinary usage of it, but it's the pressures. It's really synonymous with me starting out and calling it the cost. It is the pressure that is produced by anything growing. Because the more it grows, the more it must be fed. The more it grows, the more it does. Or else it would begin to atrophy. It would begin to stall out itself. It would begin to die, and life is not dying. And up to a certain point, you're not dying. You grow. Grow, 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 grow. But as you grow, the energy, the cost of energy increases. Because when you're 5 years old, what does it take to feed you a day? $2. What does it take to feed you today? $10. The pressure, the cost, the rewards are a kind of undesignated synonym for expansion itself. This has a very specific purpose in me bringing it up. Since this is the case, ordinarily, you would assume, would you not, even before I say it, one or two of you already giggling and writing, that you should keep the doors open 25 hours a day. That coffee always on, hash browns always at ready. It is the pressure, it is the cost of energy itself that will increase the amount of work done. There are vague realizations of this that life is allowed to seep into ordinary consciousness. That is, of how much more work you can get done under certain situations when you're absolutely under the gun. How much better you can study, how much better you can retain things you've read when you realize that the midterm is tomorrow and you haven't even opened a book since the first day of class. It's surprising how one's memory, assuming you're wired up to pass the course, assuming that that's part of your job. And I mean wired up in the sense of your physiological job in life, and not wired up off of numerous drugs that you might put into your body. It is known on a very lower end motor level, down under certain pressures, that a 98-pound woman can pick up a 2,500-pound, the end of a 2,500-pound car, to lift it off of her baby's foot, off of her husband's chest, which is impossible, they say. And yet, the woman did it. The people can do things under just very isolated and very extreme situations when the cost of energy, they call it pressure, necessity, but it's the cost of energy has immediately, just suddenly, surprisingly increased. And what actually happens is, contrary to three-dimensional intelligence and expectations, is more work gets done. The more it costs, the more it gets done. That is another description of what more complex dimensional growth is. Whereas if you only see it from the three-dimensional level, it's folly. It's not true. That the more energy costs, the less work can get done. But you've got to be able to get some glimpse. It is not true. It is like, I'll give it to you another way. The more you grow, the more you got to have to eat. The more you eat, the more you got to grow. Right? The more you eat, the more you got to exercise. The more you got to do, you got energy. The more you do, the more you grow. The more you grow, the more you got to eat. The more you eat, the more you got to do. The more you do, the more you grow. The more you grow, the more you got to eat. The more you eat, the more you got to do. The more you do, the more you got to grow. Up to the point that they say, hey, we decide to buy your farm. Or we decide to take your offer. I would encourage you to find a connection, if I don't make it very clear, between that and something else. My self-named real explorer, person actively engaged in this, a homing pigeon has found his home in the air. If you've lighted, you hadn't really found your home. But such a person, such a real explorer, is continually, if they're doing it correctly, they are pushing at the uncharted frontiers of all possibilities. They're continually treading right at the edges of chaos intellectually. And all the while, or actually not a real revolutionist, all the while pushing at the frontiers, treading at the edge of chaos, all the while with no backup plan. No contingency scheme, no fallback position. Or else you are not a real revolutionist. You've landed somewhere. You crawled down the hull of the ship. You're seasick or you're frightened. You were wishing you were back home, and probably to the point that you can dream that you are back home. As is oftentimes the case with this, I can state it in several ways, but you should be able to grasp the possible use of it. I could say that once you hear this and it strikes you as having some possible validity and use, is then I could tacitly encourage you, and you should be able to hear it, that, well, I do have backup plans, and I never think about it, and I should abandon them. But some of you may not see that you have backup plans. Everybody has a backup plan. If you got a dialogue, you got a backup plan. And of course, you got an internal dialogue, or you wouldn't be sitting here. Everybody talks to themselves. Even those of you that may be seeing this for the first time and think you don't talk to yourself, tut-tut. We're not talking about somebody that stands around out loud and talks to themselves. We're talking about everybody that talks to themselves. That's what passes as ordinary thought. Because even when you're thinking, how do you know what you're thinking? Somebody's talking and somebody else is listening. You've got a backup plan as long as you have faith in, as long as you depend on, as long as you accept the dialogue as being any representation of you, as long as you take that as being your individuality. You got a backup plan. Because you think, well, to make a simple example, well, I like the sound of this. I saw several tapes and read some things he wrote. I'll try this for a while. And of course, if it don't work out, what the hell? I hadn't lost anything. I'll leave. Or you get a little further. You know, this is what I've been looking for, this kind of stuff. I don't know whether I can ever do kind of things that I hear talked about. I don't know if I can go that far, but in fact, some of them, you know, I'm still an individual. I've still got my wits. I don't take everything I hear about this, Some of the stuff is obviously true, and some of it escapes me, and then some of it just can't be correct. He's either wrong, lying, or it's so allegorical, you know, that Moses' goat would choke on it. Do you understand? All of that is a backup plan. If you think that was too exotic, you know, well, yeah, let's move in together. That's okay by me. And you think to yourself, as fast as you can say it, oh, we can move in together because if it don't work out, what the hell? You know, it cost me 3 hours to move my stuff over to your place. Well, we just move out. Or, yeah, let's get married. What the hell they make divorce lawyers for? They gotta work. They gotta live if it doesn't work out. All of that. Maybe you've already jumped a little ahead. The way ordinary intelligence works is that everybody has a backup plan in everything. The ultimate backup plan, if I got to push it far enough, is like the guy that said that anytime he feels real despondent or he feels like life is pushing him around or he gets real angry, at least it gives him some personal satisfaction to realize that even to him, a lowly carpenter, a man driving a 49 Nash, at least it gives him some feeling, if not superiority, at least a kind of co-existing power of life to always realize that available even to him is the possibility of suicide, say. So you can look at that as the ultimate fallback plan. And if that's too harsh for you, just death itself. But everybody at ordinary level has a fallback plan, a fallback position. If you're doing this, you don't have one. And there's a reason. And it's not just, as I said, the approach of saying, well, I'll work on this, and if I find I have one, to test out your idea, I'll try not to consider it, or I'll do away with it. Put it this way. Take my other example, referring to this as an exploration. You leave the old world, and you do sail across to the new land, and you get there. Let's assume that it is this solitary. Forget Columbus and all of his merry men. Plus, I know for a fact all of them wasn't all that merry, but that there it is, you have landed this new spot, this new land, no name, nobody, no people, no nothing. How can you have a backup plan? You don't know how you got there, in a sense. Don't make me stretch this metaphor to the point that it's going to snap back and hurt somebody. Just there you are, and you land and you start wandering off. What kind of backup plan can you have there? You don't know anybody. You don't know the lay of the land. You don't know anything about it. So you do not have a backup plan. Now between here and there, I'll stick with allegory for a minute. There you are, and you're not really sure you're at the new land yet. You seem like you sail up and you see it, and then you're pushed back. Storms drive you back. I'm beginning to sound like a minister. The storms of life drive you back. You seem to progress, and then you seem to go back. You seem to be your old self, and then you seem to be close to something new. All right, you're out there. All right, you hadn't landed. Or you land, and suddenly you stump your toe, and you're back in the middle of the ocean, and you're tossed about. The thing is, even when you're out there, you can't have a backup plan. Or you're not doing it. Because the ultimate backup plan is, well, fuck all this. I'm going to turn around and go back home. A real explorer, a real revolutionist, got no backup plan. If you're going to be a revolutionist, which this happens out in ordinary life, not internally but outernally, you ought to know about this. One's happened recently. Is little bands began, or one guy, and it may turn into a band, of would-be revolutionists. They may even be identified as revolutionists. They may even go, yes, that's us. And it turns out that they get squashed. Or else 2 days later, everybody's forgotten about them. You know why? Because you're not a revolutionist. If you got a backup plan, well, let's storm the gates. Let's attack the government. Let's take on the powers. And then somebody in the group says, what if it gets real sticky and nasty out there? All right. Well, everybody run down 4th Avenue and I'll meet you back in the woods. That's no revolution. It's no exploration for everyone else, or even for you to believe that, well, you sail so far and you fall off the edge of the world. Okay? If you get out of sight, you're probably done for. You got to go on your boat and sail out of sight and keep looking, make sure I'm out of sight. In other words, if they're correct, it's too late to go back. It's just a matter of maybe a few more inches, and I'm going to drop off into God knows where. A real explorer does not have a backup plan. Now, I've talked, the way I've talked since I started this paragraph, it's not really something to directly attack. It's not something that I can encourage or that you would go, by God, I hear something now, I'm not sure what, but just the allegorical significance of it touches my little soul, and therefore I'm going to do away with all backup plans. You can't do that. But you can do this. You can be aware of the fact that everything that normally runs through your own dialogue, everything that runs through your nervous system, a name can be put upon, has a backup plan, has a fallback position. Except this. There is no fallback position. There is no alternative plan. There is no contingency scheme. You just do it. But you are not doing it if you can be aware of the fact that you do. Not that you selected it, not that you thought about it, but if the common dialogue is running your intelligence, then you have got a fallback position. Or else you don't have a dialogue. There would not be two possibilities. And they may not appear to be that clear-cut to you. Well, if you were ordinary, as soon as you think about it now, you should realize it is ordinary, because as long as you've got life running through the dialogue, that all the energy that reaches the intellectual, the cortical area of your nervous system, all of that energy is running like another crude metaphor, like alternating current. That all the energy seems to have an off and on, a plus or a minus, a this or a that. As long as it's running that way, you have got a fallback position in everything. The point is, it's not the fallback position that's keeping you where you are. I'm just pointing out another aspect of what that ordinary energy is. Your intelligence will never go anywhere. You'll never find a new territory. You'll never leave where you are. You'll never be an individual. You'll never, never, never fill in the blanks. Of course, for those who want to look on the brighter side, which suits me fine, remember all this is a waste of time. Because everything I'm saying about you'll never do so-and-so, a more complex response to that is, well, so what? That is, you'll never be able to do this unless you take into consideration the kinds of things I pointed out. Really? Yes. Well, how cute. It's just a hobby. I just thought I'd point it out. Because you can say, so what? And at least this is not like a religion, because if you say so what to a religion, after they give you their best shot, and so if you don't do so-and-so, you will, something bad will happen. They go, well, so what if you don't follow this? And they say, so what? So what? God will take you and go, you'll die, and everybody forget about you. Or you'll die and you'll be tortured and everybody will laugh at you. Imagine the worst thing could happen to you right now, and you think, all right, I'm imagining it. That's what'll happen. All right, see, that's serious. But this, one good thing about this, when I say things like, you'll never do so-and-so unless you do so-and-so, unless you think about so-and-so, unless you get past that point, you won't be a real explorer. You won't be a part of this. And if you go, well, all right, if I don't, then so what? Then the answer is, so what? Nothing. At least you got to admit I don't frighten children. We got to turn the tape over. I'm going on to one of the more practical areas that I threatened earlier, except to tell you that this is very pertinent. That actually doing this, not something that you can attack from a negative sense that you're going to wipe it out, but I'm telling you to actually be doing this. And this is not something way off in some fairyland I'm talking about, because many of you have already been through. It's a continuing process, but many of you have already experienced this. It's what you think of as being the highlights of your experience of this. You know, peak times is like you've gotten a full blast of all possible energy running into your nervous system. All of that. What you were dealing with then, if you can think back and feel any of it now, is at that time you had no fallback position. That you were just kind of there. Even ordinary literature out in the city life lets this happen after the fact. There are books, or in the mystical section and the religious section, of people describing all sorts of so-called metaphysical and enlightening experiences, and these things have happened throughout the ages, and all the little things they try and tell you later. shame on them, but they try and tell somebody. What they were describing from another view is they were describing of themselves as being in a position of having no fallback position. There was no backup plan. And they try to say things like, I just looked out and I suddenly realized, yeah. Now I know sometimes they go further. I suddenly looked out and I realized that we all are our fellow man. Not because my religion, somebody's religion said so. I just looked out and realized, yeah. But what they're saying is, I realized, yeah, on the basis that there was no. It's not a theory. It was not something that suddenly I did become a good Christian or a good Jew or that God spoke to me. I suddenly realized that such and such is the fact. And there is no debate. There is no fallback position. There's not even the possibility that what I saw was wrong. Because at the time there was not. They're fudging a little now to try to tell you because it brings into play, of course, the ever-present, all-popular, dichotomous basis of communication between humans. But what they were saying in their own way was that experience, that mystical moment, or moments, was such that there was no fallback position. It was no longer a case of either or this or that. It just, that's having no fallback position. That if this ain't it, I'm done for. If that helps. When you're doing this, there is no fallback position. It's another way of saying there is no, I'm doing pretty good of not saying any more about this, that you're no longer discussing whatever it is, something that you understand that you should do, or something you understand, something you see. You quit talking about it to you. The dialogue may want to go on, but what the hell? Rain wants to fall. They want to raise the tax on beer. All kinds of strange things happen in life, but that doesn't mean you have to listen to it. The dialogue's still talking, but once you understand something's true, what else are you going to say about it? Because if you got anything else to say about it, you've got a what? You got a fallback position. You got a backup plan. You got a backup idea. You got a contingency. If you're doing this, there is no contingency. Where are you going back to? Now, a self-fulfilling prophecy. I said I was about to stop, and by God I will, on that subject. There's something a little more practical, some of you might think. And me speaking in the last several tapings, I brought up about the idea of rich man and the difficulty of rich man throughout history being able to enter the kingdoms of the gods, exceptional states and all that. And, if you recall, I was responding to someone's observation, question, about the energy that seems to be available when you do a job well done, right? Well, I wanted to say something to you people specifically. I brought this up once before in a slightly different fashion. This has nothing to do with me making a self-fulfilling prophecy to you, and it's nothing to give you the blues. But let me point out the people who are attracted, that is, people that life is wired up. Life produces in its own way the cellular makeup all the way right up into the cortical areas of the nervous system in individuals, that you are basically outfitted to fulfill a certain purpose, a job. It's a human description, but you're fulfilling a purpose within the life of life, in the body of life. One of the jobs is to be, the job description would be, rich man. Those normally wired up to really take this as their job, their serious hobby, are not normally wired up to have this as a second occupation or a parallel occupation to be a rich man. I said I don't give anybody the blues, but you might as well face that. That is not self-fulfilling prophecy. If any of you can follow your own muses, your own talents, you surely know this, and you get rich, I'd be delighted. I mean, if that's what you want me to say, it's irrelevant. I won't hold it against you. I don't care. And I'm not saying that somewhere it is stamped into stone over in the fifth dimension. that you personally, you individually, cannot get rich. If that's what you want, I'm all for it. But I'm telling you, and you should be able to know, and look throughout history. For one reason, I was going to point out that all the religions, all of what you would think of as being some traces of this, all of them got some comment they made about, you know, a rich man probably can't do this. A rich man is probably not ever going to see Allah. That the cosmic forces do not seem to smile upon the rich. It's always just strung everywhere. I pointed that out, and you should be well read enough to know that. That does not cut out the possibility of individual exemptions. So I'm not saying that some of you may do it, but in general, note, throughout the history of that, right up until today, I know some of you do quite well. You can drive new cars, you pay the rent, but as far as the job of being a rich man, it is normally not compatible, not for any spiritual or metaphysical reasons. It's just that people involved with the job of being a rich man or rich woman normally have limited time for additional hobbies. You do not find rich men involved with this kind of activity. You never have. Never, never. The reason I bring this up specifically tonight is, that being the case, let's say that you may be the exemption. If you're now worrying or thinking you are, I hope you are, if that's what you hope. But assuming that you're not a rich man, now listen, you should then see to it that the little small jobs you do should be the ones well done. You cannot, or you're cheating yourself. You're draining yourself of energy, plus some pleasure, to keep waiting that, well, I'll devote all my talents. I won't worry about whether I washed the car when I said I would. I won't worry about that I decided I'd clean up after myself all the time. I won't worry about that I was going to fix the screen door, and I won't fix it, I'll just strap some duct tape over that hole. Whatever it is, anything I mentioned doesn't matter. It's up to you, the way you're wired up, that the small jobs, I'm telling you, and they may be your hobbies. I don't mean it has to be work, back-breaking work, but whatever it is you do by your small jobs, I'm telling you, it may be your best shot in life. Shots. Continuing example is take those small ones, and encourage you with all my being, is do the bastards in a manner well done. Don't let yourself be distracted by the ordinary dialogue, the kind of dreams that you may have had all your life, which may come true. But the kind of dreams, well, I'm on the verge. Somebody's going to hear my music. Somebody's going to see my painting. Somebody's going to read my book. I'll finally get it finished, and I'll accidentally lose it on a bus, and accidentally a world-famous literary agent will be riding a bus, and will pick it up, and I'll become rich. And then this kind of stuff about fixing my screen door or cutting the grass, I'll hire somebody to do it. I don't have to worry about that. I'm going to do my big job in a manner well done. Assuming that may not be the case, I'm telling you, the little ones do the jobs well done. Not by my definition, not necessarily by anybody's definition. Because you shouldn't be, if you're involved with this and wired up for it, you shouldn't be that much in need of an audience. That is, for someone else to tell you when you've done it right. But to please yourself, whatever it is, not me, not anybody else, the little jobs, including your hobby, I'm using job in the widest sense, just your motor activities, that which you finally have to put into motion, not just plans, actual actions, no matter how small they are, is do them as jobs well done, because that may be all you're going to get. Not that that's all of life, but as far as the enjoyment, as far as the energy you need that come about through jobs well done, instead of it being one gigantic job such as being a rich man, which would take really turning your attention, if you were wired up that way, into that. Because rich men don't normally get to be rich by worrying about whether they got holes in their pants, whether they got an up-to-date haircut, not in the beginning, whether their screen door is fixed. That's why they got limited time for such as this. You should pursue whatever it is, your hobbies, as I've said, I'll say it again, because I'll repeat. I don't mind repeating myself. I've told you that, and I'll say it again. Or did I say that I hate to repeat myself? Which was it? Well, at any rate, I'll say it again. Whatever it is you want to do in life, you're sane enough, you're wired up enough, if you've been around this at all, for me not to have to give you exceptions to this, that whatever your hobbies in life are, they're not in conflict with this. It would have to be something that you wouldn't be here anyway, that your hobbies in life is holding up 7-Eleven stores on the weekend. Doing S&M sexual acts on yourself or something. Whatever your interest is in life, is pursue it. Maybe it will get you rich if that's what you want. Maybe it will make you famous. It's irrelevant. But do it. Follow it. It's not in conflict with this. But if you're going to do it, do the bastard right. That is to you. Do the job well done if nobody else knows about it. Because all of you know this by now. You just forget it through the noise of the dialogue that there is a singular enjoyment to doing a job well done to yourself. Not because God loves you for doing it, not because your parents are approving from paradise somewhere or looking up from the grave. It is simply the way life is arranged in the positive way that it encourages itself to grow, and it encourages people by and large to grow, except those apparently necessary fringe fuck-ups. Those outside the normal general flow, the digestive flow of life's energy system. Do the small ones. All of you should know this once I point it out. But you should not ignore the small stuff. Or conversely, if you want to look at it another way, if you actually belong here, you have got to know that there is a reality to the fact of no matter how small the job is, that you decided to do it one way, or however it came about. You think you should do it one way, and you don't. You don't belong here if you keep walking past that, and that doesn't bother you. Now, I don't care what it is. I don't have to make up any more examples. Do some little small something that you, every time you look at it, you should have done it otherwise. You didn't finish it, and you should finish it. You cannot walk past it without you having a backup plan. There is a contingency that you look at it, and it is not a job well done. It cost you. You're just walking past, and you might as well be stepping on a nail. And you drop a little blood every time you go past that, every time you look at it. And I don't care how small, because if you're not going to be a rich man, I'll tell you one more time, these small ones may be it. Something else I was mentioning in the last couple of tapings I wanted to expand on a bit when I was talking about repetition. And I was specifically pointing out how repetition produces strength and seems to produce, or does produce, that which would seem to be quite appropriate at one level, such as the quite physical, the motor levels of doing repetitions of exercise to build up your general well-being of your health, doing exercises to build up your specific muscular strength, and how it was otherwise the further you went up the nervous system. Well, I wanted to point out, I just mentioned this, but very specifically, there is nothing inherently, specifically incorrect about motor habits. Such as, you got to schedule what time you get up every morning. You got to schedule, I don't mean that you're going to die, but it just turns out that you're up at 6:15, by 6:30, 6:40, 6:35 at the least, you're in your shoes and out the door and you're running. And you may run at more or less the same place all the time. That sort of thing, strictly motor habits, there is nothing incorrect about that. Now, as I did mention, you can play with it for your own benefit to do things differently. There's nothing wrong with that either. But there is nothing to be gained per se struggling against motor habits. Contrary, once you understand this, in a sense, let us put the running. That you're in the position, you've got your life going right now, let us say, that you're up, and let's just say the locale itself, not necessarily the time, but now the locale, that you run in the same place every morning. Here's one possibility. That you got the motor level of the nervous system to such a point that you can run, and if you were so inclined, let us say, or so tried to, you could then let the upper areas, say specifically the cortical level, give it some freedom to try and develop its own individuality. Maybe you could begin to think great thoughts, new thoughts, while running. And the running, one way to be able to do that, one, it may appear to be small, but it's not, or I wouldn't bring it up, is you've got such motor habits that you can run, and as they say, almost give it no thought whatsoever. Through the basis of habit, that you run the same way, and you know where holes are. In a sense, you don't even have to look. You know when you've got to jump from where you run down this one pathway for a couple of miles, and you know that there's two spots that you've got to jump over like this because there's a hole. And you never took time to stop and fill up the hole. You just jump over it. You can do that and still be cruising the cosmos. Try it one more way, then. Not only is there nothing inherently incorrect about motor habits, they can, in fact, be useful in that you can take other energy, which ordinary people might refer to as attention, and run the energy up to the cortical, and even if you know how, into the limbic, into the feeling system, while you've almost got the lower areas on autopilot. But habit into the upper areas is a different story. With ordinary people, now remember, this is not a religion, because when I say it's a different story, of course inferring it should be avoided. If this was ordinary, and other people say, well, wait a minute, what if I don't avoid it, and I just go ahead and I have the same kind of, as you're calling them, habits in my thinking I do my body, what'll happen to me? And I'd say, well, okay, nothing. So remember, this is not a threat. That is, if you don't struggle against and free yourself in the upper areas, like in the thought processes, from habit, something bad is going to happen to you. What? Well, all right, nothing. Except you're not doing this. I had something else. I've had several people from some of the groups out of town and here over the last year or so. I've had several people write me little curious notes. I don't mean that the notes particularly were curious, but people wondered what the basis was. Was there a basis about prayer? And I think I'll finally respond. I don't believe I even wrote anybody a note back, other than to maybe tell them that someday I'd get around to mentioning it, because it's a valid question, because as far back as history, you can find people talking about prayer. All right, I'm going to tell you what prayer is from a revolutionist dictionary. All right, from my dictionary. I'm going to tell you what prayer is. Prayer is formalized talking to yourself. Prayer is formally dressed dialogue. Prayer is addressing yourself via the dialogue in a much more business-like manner. That's what prayer is. Now, I'll assume all of you who've been around here for a while, you can do this, and you people on tape, you'll just have to try and follow this if you're new to this. Strip the idea of prayer of all religious connotations. Can you? Because you got stories of people in a form of praying, let's go back in the Western world, at least to Grecian history, whereas their gods were a bunch of, drunk dolts and oafs. Not, you're stretching it to call it equal to the Judaic Christian God, but they prayed. Now what were they doing? Forget all psychological and spiritual views of this. Back to the good old electrical, chemical, molecular level where this all exists in a more complex manner. What are they actually doing? The kind of activity that is the dialogue that life runs through people, that you are apparently thinking, and you cannot think without there being this dichotomy of it, that you think and you're aware that you're thinking. I'm sorry I wasn't here to help Descartes out. Prayer represents a kind of focusing of that energy in a momentary basis. And me say focusing is what then I was putting inside the verbalization of me saying the quick definition, which was very valid, that prayer is a formal talking to oneself. Instead of the dialogue just apparently babbling through your mind of, boy, I should cut down on food, I should cut down on food, I should be nicer to my children. Prayers, no matter to whom they seem to have been directed throughout the ages, are what? It's people in some way, and it's normally tied to some kind of ritual, if it's no more than closing your eyes or getting off by yourself, and they'd do something. They'd go stare into a bowl of fire, and they would say, oh God, or gods, or whoever it was, help me stop eating so much. Make me a better parent. Now what is that? That's the same kind of flow. That is the same kind of running dialogue that was already going through that person, but prayer seems to be that they stopped for a minute, went in, shaved, not only put on a good suit, maybe if they had one, put on a tuxedo, and went through all of that, got all clean, got like this, you know. And it's very common for people to go on fast before they pray, like cleanse the body. It's the whole thing of I got myself pulled together. And of course then they say, well, I'm going to the temple, or I'm going to the place. But all they're doing is they got all dressed up, and it's like then to themselves going, okay, look, as all of you who've been around here know, this is not laughing at religion or prayer. You should be able to learn from this, and if it must, use it. And of course, I don't mean praying to somebody, but life has let that out. And of course, as always, it appears to be connected to something extraneous, furious as far as doing something extraordinary is concerned, that this is actually praying to some other being. If they knew what they're talking about, yeah, all right. But it's not the God or Jehovah or some old man painted on black velvet. It is taking the energy running through you, which is the energy of life, the kind of thing that comes out in our higher nervous system intellectually up to this level, and the brain itself comes out verbally, either tacitly or overtly, and it comes out and it's called prayer, of appealing to some higher force. What you're appealing to is a more concise force. That, all right, I'm serious now. I'm not just babbling, boy, I ought to quit drinking. I ought to give up alcohol. God, I just can't seem to do it. So you go through this ritual, you get all dressed up, and you get very businesslike. You say, and that's what it amounts to, instead of just this kind of babble of, geez, I ought to quit drinking. You know, while you're sitting there at a bar doing one, you say, I ought to quit drinking. I'm getting fat, and I'm dizzy, and I don't tell my liver, you know, like, I ought to quit drinking. And somebody says, have another one. You go, well, one more, but I got to go. And at the same time, you're saying, I ought to quit this. Prayer is like, you know, no drink in your hand, no nothing, get all dressed up, cleaned up, and say, listen, I'm serious. I should quit drinking. I mean, I'm serious now. This is business. Except it comes out another way. Gods, please help me. Make me quit drinking. It is a formal, a more business-like manner of talking to oneself. How about this, though? I keep pointing out, and many of you have had your own glimpses of this, I tell you that if you're going to do something, you shouldn't be talking to yourself about it, much less anybody else. You shouldn't, of course, all of you, I say of course. You know I've said it enough that I'll say of course and assume that you go, oh, of course. But if you're going to do something, if you're going to change, you don't tell anybody. You don't tell your mother, your father, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your husband, your wife. You don't tell somebody, listen, I'm going to quit drinking. I'm going to give up sugar. I'm going to quit smoking. You don't tell anybody anything. Then a little deeper than that, a little more enriched, that you do not tell you. You don't ever say, in any way. I know it sounds strange to people who have not done it, but you do not. The dialogue will talk about it. It'll talk about, like, have you really quit drinking? Is this just a temporary thing? Hey, you're not fooling me. You know, you quit drinking before. How many times now? Of course, you don't take it if you're ordinary as being a dialogue. It's you thinking, mulling over your past, considering, although you don't call it this, the fallback positions. Have you quit drinking? I mean, for good, or are you just going to cut? Are you just tapering off? Have you actually quit drinking? Is it for good, or like you're going to quit drinking for 6 months to prove you can? How many times have you done this? All of that is a backup plan. All of that's the ordinary energy flowing through one. To not tell yourself what you're doing, you could look at it, if you're ordinary, as being almost an anti-prayer. Except that's not it. What it is a more enriched prayer. Because turning something in the three-dimensional world over is not the solution. So it's not that talking to oneself formally, since I've already pointed out that that's what ordinary people do. That's what life allows and makes ordinary people do. So that can't be it, right? Well, you should know that. How many times you prayed already in your life? Some of you probably, you thought that's what got you started. You prayed for something at an early age like, oh God, once I get to be 15, resurrect Marilyn Monroe and send her to me. Or let me pass this test without studying. And if you do, I'll be a good boy. And if you don't, I don't know. Of course, that was your fallback position. If you let me pass this test, I'll quit drinking beer. Of course, you realize there's a good chance I won't pass this test, or at least some. It's not, when I said it's almost an anti-prayer, it was just to get you to go past that point. But now let me point out, it's not an anti-prayer. It's not just the opposite. It's almost a five-dimensional prayer. By not formally addressing yourself, by not even engaging in even a more formal manner, a more serious manner, your own dialogue. Because you can't do anything with that. That dialogue always has a fallback position. So anything the dialogue says, such as, so you quit drinking. I've noticed, it's been 6 months since you had a drink. You go, yeah. It says, I remember one time you did this when you went 8 months. It didn't prove anything. Next 2 years you drank just as much. Oh, shut up. You don't have to deal with that if you don't talk to it, if you don't tell it. Well, I got two items here on the table. Rich men and prayer. How about something else? In the earlier times, apparently outernally, but in you, but you can see earlier times, like Grecian times, let's take that again. At earlier times, only the rich people knew about prayer. Only the rich were told that they should pray. Even to their, little sketchy gods that they had, that whole stable of gods. But it was only the rich, the poor, the bourgeoisie, the slaves of the city, the Athenians. There was no dictums from gods. There was no stories from the gods that the ordinary people, which is why I'm calling the poor people as opposed to the patricians of the time, the real rich. The poor people, they didn't have to fool with that. They had to watch out because the gods would get angry and send down lightning bolts and flood the place. There was no justice. But the poor people, they weren't even encouraged. They weren't told, well, you should do things. You should pray to the gods. That is, formally, in some way, pull this energy together and address the gods. It was only the rich. You don't want to think about that for a second? It was even, trust me, at least tacitly, what was being also said was the gods did not even notice the poor. The gods only took notice of those who were fiscally comfortable. That the poor people were just kind of poor people, just there. It was only the rich that counted. Only the rich man was obliged to pray. That I guess if a poor person even tried to pray, it was just like a foolish act. Like teaching an elephant to walk on his front legs. So what? It accomplished nothing. Served no purpose. But now would you look, as life has expanded, both internally and outernally, as life has expanded, it brought about the need for the poor to pray. And now, you could look at it, you got to listen quick, I don't have time and the inclination to pursue this. Now, from a three-dimensional view, it's the opposite. It's the poor that are encouraged to pray, and the rich don't pray anymore. Episcopalians do not pray. Of course, the real rich don't believe in anything anyway. They're not religious. They never have been. Whether they go to a church for some reason or not. The real rich now are not even a party to it. The poorer you are, the more you have to pray. The more it seems, the more that the institutions, that is life itself, but the institutions, that the prayer seems to be directed. What else has a poor person got? The poor now have to participate through prayer and paying, which is a form of prayer. Consider all of that I've just pointed out, which is a historical, unrecognized fact. Consider that having to do now with the poor and the rich aspects of your own nervous system. That is, the more simplistic and the more complex. Because the more complex have their parallel in what I'm talking about. That is, the more complex ideas you have, the more complex possibilities that you entertain. And since I brought that up, how much time we got? All right. From the last two times when I was talking about the primitives, remember? And then using as an apparent outernally example to start with these people on this island, the primitives. And I pointed out that people sometimes, due to situations you can bring up of the primitives on this island, ate the more complex anthropologists that showed up. And therefore, could you not say that the simple ended up in contravenance of my law that the simple consume the more complex? And I said at times, if for no other reason, because it leads off to another area of consideration and exploration, if you have any doubt as to what is the more complex and what is the more serious, use my example right there as a springboard, that you can always depend on this. The simple do not have the tendency, the wherewithal, the ability to move about, to come and go as the complex do. That literally, they do not. But then, beyond the literal, as I wanted to specifically, I mentioned a little bit, but point out to you, and I was even last time, you remember, using it in a little more limited and slightly different way, that those who are more simplistic, that would be adjudicated socially as being the more conservative, are always less likely. They have less ability, less tendency, less interest in moving about, even of traveling on this planet. That the more conservative they are, the more they seem to have their kind of tribal, their nationalistic foot nailed to wherever they are. The less tolerance they have, much less interest in foreign people, different looking people, different speech, different cultural norms and all that. Specifically, I wanted to be sure that you understand that all of this has direct, quite specific pertinence here. Primitive ideas, conservative ideas, which is another, it's a more complex synonym for outdated. Now, I don't mean it's no longer of any use right now. It still wouldn't even be in currency if it was not of some use, but it is outdated insofar as it having any new, fresh nutritional value. The primitive ideas literally in your brain have less ability to move about. It is stuck into habitual patterns, not motor patterns anymore, but now cortical patterns, and literally you have ideas that are not dissimilar to my 5th grade educated, fat, polyester suited, pickup truck driven, old guy in New Jersey, Mississippi, the outskirts of Tehran, anywhere. The guy that's sitting there was stuck the flag of his country or his state in the ground, says, fuck everybody else, I don't want to travel, I've heard about travel, I ain't going anywhere, I don't hear new ideas, I'm a Republican, or I'm a Shiite, I'm whatever I am, and that's the only thing that counts. That being the apparently archetypical external manifestation. Primitive ideas are the same literally in the brain. They have not the tendency or the ability to move about. They will sit there on the front porch neurologically, and they will not move about. They will not go off and explore how that one idea might possibly connect to another one and produce something new. They cannot do it any more than you can find this old fat guy named Elmore that I just said and slap him around and say, snap out of it. You're an idiot. Just because you're 50 years old, don't you realize that Democrats have some abilities? People of different races have something to say. You're not the only person in the world. Snap out of it. And him suddenly go, you're right, I've wasted my whole life. Hey, Helen, go burn my Klan uniform. Throw away all those throw away the Bible. We'll go take up another religion. You know that's not going to happen. And yet, you don't notice it up here. It's the same guy sitting there. His foot nailed to his tribal location. He is a primitive. That idea he cannot explore. And the belief that people ordinarily laugh makes them have that, well, if I read more, if I think more, if I watch more TV, well, if I watch more PBS sometime, that if I read more, if we had more education, we'd have more wisdom and understanding. Part of that synonymous confusion of life putting out. That, yeah, if I had more information up here, I'd do better. I'd be more insightful. Once the information is in common currency, it's already becoming outdated. It qualifies for what I'm telling you people to be primitive. Primitive ideas, the same way as primitive people, have very little ability, to say the least. Very little ability, almost no tendency to move about, to travel. I'm talking about up here. They jump those same ditches, those same neurological gaps, and they got no ability, almost none, till they start to jump from one to another to go, you know, I've never been down this alley over here. I've never jumped over to that one. Why do I keep jumping over the same synapse all the time? Well, I'll tell you why they do it. It's because that's the right one to jump. Yeah, I'm a Republican. My daddy was a Republican. That's the thing to be. I'm a Christian. Anybody that's not a Christian, fuck them. Being a Christian is the only decent thing. That's the continual jump. And to say otherwise is to deny that you have any knowledge of the workings of your own brain, your own nervous system. The dialogue runs through you and you take what it says as being it. Other than I don't know how I would explain why you show up here periodically. But you better listen to me, because if you don't listen to me, you know what's going to happen. What? Nothing. Which, of course, is about the worst shot you could get, is nothing. I'm going to end, maybe I'll talk about this in detail sometime, and I started to let Kyrute use it one time, but I'm going to put it on you, and we'll leave the tape here and you do with it as you see fit. It is a kind of curious, unrecognized fact related to what I'm talking about tonight, and it goes like this. Maestro, give me a chapter 7. Give me a German expressionist, augmented. Or give me an arpeggio. Preferably one in the South Seas, but only the simple believe that words have actual magic. Prayer, curses, hexes, chanting, emotional words, love. Only the simple believe that words, only the simple believe that words have actual magic, comma. The more complex, no they do, except ordinarily they don't understand the meaning or the nexus thereof. If I had let Kyrute say that, then I would be inclined to, if I had ever made some comment, to say, good old Kyrute is better than some of the gods I've heard about. Is with one hand he gives, and with the other hand you don't notice. You think it's a punchline and laugh all the time. That he apparently gave, and then he took the whole son of a bitch back, and you laughed and wrote it down like, oh, God, how insightful. And you didn't hear what happened. It's like saying, hello, my name's Punch. And over here the other hand says, ha ha, no it's not. And you go, ha, boy, let me remember that. I'll do it again for you. Only the simple believe that words have actual magic. That's, once I say it, shouldn't that be simple enough for you to see? It takes primitive people, simple people, to believe that words And there are people still existing by all reports on this planet right now. And if you doubt that, look in your own nervous system, since we don't have time to go to the South Seas. That words, that you can actually say a word that the gods will kill you for, or never forgive you for. Or that there are other ways that there are chants, or there are hexes that a witch doctor or a shaman can give you, and you can repeat this word or just go up to a person that you hate and say the word, and they'll begin to die. They'll get sick. No, I will assume that all of you will laugh at that. But you know it's true. You know that there are religions going on now with people dressed up, educated in the Western world, that they believe that there are words that they can say. Be healed. All kinds of stuff. But it's only the simple who believe that words, the word itself, and they take it from all their Vedic Mikams, that their gods, their prophets said their words, that within themselves, their words that the gods gave us. A word, a bunch of words, this word that has power to heal, to curse, to encourage, to doom. But it's only the simple believe that words have actual magic, comma. It's only the simple that believe that. The more complex know they do. And that's the kind of stuff you would think I've been talking about off and on for the last several weeks or more. That in some cases talk is the only thing that you can do. That I even suggested to you most strongly that talk may be the ultimate victor. The final triumph may come about via talk. So now back to my unrecognized phenomenon law. That only the simple believe that words have actual magic. The more complex know they do. Except ordinarily they do not comprehend the meaning or the nexus thereof. As Mary Payson would say, case closed. Either that or Garçon, another round for the bears in the back room.